Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 79 of the Podcana podcast. This week we're going to be discussing the NA versus EU event that's currently taking place. We're also going to be taking a look at some early Set 6 tournament decks, including many of the decks included within that event, since many of the top players in Lorcana are experimenting currently, trying to do some innovative deck building within this event, so it's going to be exciting to analyze. Then we're also going to be talking about the NA and EU Championship event, LCQ, format pricing, all that jazz. But before we get into it, I'll say a huge thank you to Heavy Play yet again for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. They're known for their incredible CURV card sleeves that have rounded corners at one end of the sleeve. Never again will you accidentally shuffle your cards upside down into your deck. They also have their EquipMag system that connects their Playmat, Deckbox, and Dicebox all together. So no more rolling up your Playmat and rushing to your next table. Easy magnetic connection system for easy transport around locals and tournaments. So be sure to use code PODCANA to save 10% at checkout and use our link down below in the description. Thanks again to Heavy Play for sponsoring this episode. So Brendan, how was your?
I didn't catch it last week, but did you guys talk about why I wasn't able to make the podcast?
There was a
very American reason.
There was a thread. All I'll say was there was a thread of like, oh my god, where's Brendan? Has he quit the podcast and all of this? So I responded with one reason, which I think is the reason you gave us, but then you told us something else. So I said you had to bring your dog to the vet, which was an emergency, right? That was one thing.
Yeah, well, it was the only time I could get him in, and he had like a pretty bad heat rash, or like a hot spot. He's a golden retriever, so it happens. I took him swimming, and I guess he didn't get dry enough, and it was bad. So it was the only time I could get in, unfortunately. And then also like my times are pretty tight with working in the office now. But then I went to my office right after that, and there was a mass shooting outside my office, like literally right outside, like on my block, which is crazy. And I was about 10 minutes away from basically being a part of it. Like I had walked in about 10 minutes before that happened. They shut down our street for like the whole day. We couldn't leave. We couldn't get. It was just ridiculous. So it was just like it's not funny, but it was funny in the context of like I was, we had kind of pushed the podcast to this day because the only day that worked for me. I'm like, I wake up and then they get these texts like, oh, I actually have to take my dog to the hospital, which is ridiculous. And it was like, oh, by the way, I'm like locked in my building. There's a mass shooting outside.
Yeah, Brendan's just sending us pictures of like all the police outside, multiple different angles. He's like, yeah, there was just a shooting outside. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like America.
Yeah, it was it's very American reason, but apparently it's atypical around here, so I don't know. It is what it is. So I just thought that it was a series of unfortunate events, basically.
Yeah, but now he's back. Though I mean, we'll try and get the whole crew together eventually again.
Moyen's been slacking, bro. Just hasn't been putting in the effort.
Moyen's just taking a trip to the Philippines. You know what I'm saying? He's just going traveling. Doesn't even care about the podcast. What can I say?
Yeah, just vacation all the time.
But before we jump into our headlines, of course, we have our Spilled Ink section. This is our listener question section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a comment down below. Brendan, I would love for you to read out the first comment we have here.
Yeah, Brendan's Bizarre Pod waiting room. I mean, I like the Bizarre. I actually been playing a lot less because I just haven't had time for video games in general. But I think that's a great game. I think that will be a 10 times, and I would say nearly 50 times better game when it comes out on mobile. That game is the perfect mobile game, in my opinion. I just, as I enter my twilight years and I get a bit older, it's harder for me to kind of sit in front of a computer and like play video games. I've devolved into this like Neanderthal that kind of hunches over and plays on my phone,
No, I agree.
So I'm waiting for that.
I'm very much the same when I think... I also haven't been playing too much myself because I've just been busy with other things, but as soon as that game comes to mobile, I'll be all over it. And I'm very much the type of person as well. Maybe it sounds a bit weird, but I like to just kind of move about and I guess like just fidget or do something while I'm also like, playing games and stuff. So I'm very much a person that like I'll go on like a long walk and just jam some games and stuff. And I think we're also getting to this stage of video games in general where we're getting high quality games that you can play on mobile. But alongside that, of course, there's also these games will usually make you spend an egregious amount of money. Now, since this is a beta for the Bazaar, we haven't seen any sort of stuff like that. But I think for the most part, from what I can tell for that game, it will just be like if you run out of resources to play in a certain mode, like maybe you'll have to pay for
which is
tickets
hard to do, by the way. I think that it's almost challenging to run out of resources if you start with a reasonable amount and then you kind of like have like a mid-level performance, because in rank there's no MMR with who you face. It's like quite reasonable to get over 7 wins, and you basically profit from doing that. And then getting 10 wins is also not too challenging, it seems like, at this point. So I expect that system to change. The Bazaar is a game that I'd be happy to pay for. Not like Marvel Snap, like not the levels of Marvel Snap, but I don't have a problem with pay-to-play games. $10, $15, and flexing on how much you want to play the game. That's perfectly okay with me, even if it's $50, $100 a month. That is directly correlated to how much I enjoy and how much I play the game. Or if you look at something like Snap, you're basically gated to an entry-level experience with $100, $200 plus investment on what feels like a month-to-month basis. And then when you leave and come back, the level of that investment goes higher. And that's your entry level to sort of engage with the enjoyable metagame that exists. And I think that is basically the opposite of what I want out of a mobile video game.
For sure, yeah. No, I agree. And yeah, with that, we're going to move on to the next comment. It's from Josh DLFC. They say, rotation is necessary in my opinion. I hope that is the route Lorcana takes. So we had a lot of conversation basically just throughout the comments in last week's podcast, Brendan, about, and I actually really enjoyed it because we had a lot of people that were against rotation. We had a few people that were in favor of rotation. Some people that even commented saying initially they were against rotation, but the more myself and Moyen talked about it, they kind of started to kind of understand why it seems like quite a feasible system. But it was nice to have to see the different thoughts that our viewers were having about it, because especially some of them were newer players to Lorcana. So I said to Moyen, I said, I initially thought that newer players would be very much against rotation because they've just come into a game, they've just spent all this money on, these cards and stuff like that, and suddenly, they can't play with the cards that they've just bought. But I think a lot of people were starting to come around to the idea. But I think we also have some more comments in relation to it. So yeah,
I think it has goods and bads. And it's interesting to actually see a community that is open to having like a discussion about it, because usually it's quite polarizing. But yeah, I mean, I was actually, we were just going over some of the deck list, which we will be in this podcast as well, but you can start to see the effects, and I think that these effects will also compound. But look at the current deck lists that are kind of out there right now. Look at what's performing. It's pretty much what you've seen, plus or minus 1 or 2 cards, and then I think the flexibility for those cards to make their ways into decks as we get to set 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the margin just becomes thinner and thinner, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't mind it. I don't really feel super passionate about like we need to rotate in order for me to have a good game experience, or we don't need to rotate. But I do see, from what seems to be like a game design standpoint, the I guess like the space kind of being smaller and smaller for sets to have an impact, deck lists to change, new archetypes to evolve. It just kind of seems we're starting to hit that samey route. Also could be a lower powered set just in comparison to some other sets. But
yeah, because a few people have also said this, maybe not in our comments in particular, but I know I've been talking to some people that sets 1 through 6 were, I don't know how you want to say, like designed together. Or a lot of times in TCGs it is kind of that's either I mean it is usually sets 1 through 6 that are like, well, these are like the initial sets, like once this does well, this is the base of your set. And then maybe once we move to set 7, we'll see a lot of different things. So that's all. I mean, it's all speculation at the moment. We've no idea. But I am curious to see if we're going to see like a significant jump in power level for cards once set 7 hits,
What could that be? I mean, outside of like hybrid cards, dual color cards, maybe like generic cards, or basically no color cards, no ink. Like, what could it really be? Because we've already seen pretty big shakeups. We've seen locations. I mean, that was like wildly different than the rest of the game design. We've kind of seen, I guess, like fast, like instant lore. We've seen, if you remember like the early days of Lorcana, you couldn't really win outside of like winning on board, and now you can win out of hand, which is very, very different. It's a very different game experience. So I think locations added a big change in dynamics. So in terms of like really shaking up the game from its fundamentals, yes, there are things that they can do, and there's still a lot of design space there, but I don't think it's going to be massive. I don't think it's going to be like it's going to change the entire paradigm. So.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Next comment is from Pacer. They say, I've been testing Pluto and liking quite a bit. When testing Calhoun, I ran into a pirate deck and discovered that Hook Forceful Duelist is a pretty clean answer. You end up in a stare down where you're not questing with hook, and they're not using Calhoun unless they can kill one of your units and force you to trade the hook as well. I've been having fun with Baymax in a janky blue steel mid-range deck that uses Tadashi, Beast, Alice, Pluto, Lawrence with Flaversham plus 10 items as the draw engine. It's been pretty good, but I have realistic expectations about how it performs against a shifted Sisu. Keep with great content. Haven't tested the new Simba, but I suspect despite the great art, he may end up like Blue Fasa, a cool card which has some edge cases, but you really want him to do the thing on the turn, and then you play him, which requires some setup which isn't too difficult to disrupt. One thing that we mentioned last week was as far as Genie removal, another card that could be useful against him is Glimmer versus Glimmer. However, a 4-cost uninkable non-song that's also still in red may not be the best idea. And they just had a disclaimer saying, I play Jank on purpose and may not be a great source for test observations. Listen, if people don't play Jank, then things aren't discovered. So it's still good that you're testing a lot of these things.
What's like the, I guess, what's the community sentiment on Genie right now? Because that card seems really good.
Yeah, so myself and Moyne talked about it a lot last week. Genie is a very, very, very good card. In a lot of purple decks, has actually seemed to replace Rabbit, which I find, like, I found funny initially because a lot, like, in the early stages, people were like, Rabbit's so much better from a pure card attrition standpoint, which is true. When you're bouncing it and stuff, you get way more value out of it. But Genie is a very difficult card to remove if you want to pair the evasive keyword on the card alongside the 4 willpower. But then not only that, it's basically, remember when you used to play oh my god, what was it?
Peter Pan Shadow?
No, I'm talking about Pongo back in set 1 in Ruby Amethyst, a 2/3 quest for 2. So this is a 2/4 quest for 2. So this can really put on the gas, but also when you're playing it, it's going to replace itself. So we talked about it. The only like really efficient ways to remove Genie is 1, Brawl, which is probably the most efficient way. And then after that, it's probably going to be like a Zeus, which isn't a great card to run. You want to be able to sing the song most of the time. And then so mine was like
is
thinking,
Brawl really the most efficient way? Because that's like terrible.
Well, I mean, it's the cheapest removal card for Genie. If you think about it, what else can remove a Genie, right?
I don't know, but just think about that dynamic. Your opponent plays a 4-cost draw card, and it's like an evasive threat that can like persistently quest on board, and your best answer is a 3-cost, like a 3-cost inkable, but action that can't even be sung. That's also kind of a tech card and gets blanked in other matchups, I guess. Like, that's really bad. Yeah, I would actually just be like, fuck it, I'm not going to remove the Genie, and I'm just going to try to go under it or something like that.
I don't know. I think you may have to play against this a bit because this card has been quite impressive so far. Like Moyne's even been suggesting that in the Emerald decks, even though Emerald has access to, some of the removal songs, even one of those removal songs, unless you've got like a Strength of Raging Fire with 4 characters, can't remove it. So Moyne's suggesting, maybe Muses is like the best way to keep delaying the Genie, but they just play the Genie again. They're gonna get more value out of it, but at least you stop the tempo
based. Yeah. Well, I think that my what I was trying to get at there is that I trade Brawl for Genie, but it's still like a kind of a losing dynamic for me because my opponent redrew another card and I traded this sort of very underpowered card.
But while I do agree with you, it's like we don't have anything better to deal with this card, like, right?
Do we just approach it from a different angle where it's like we just have to beat decks that can beat on-board Genies or something like that?
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Whether it's like, you could be in something like a Ruby Sapphire deck where, you do play the Brawl, you do remove it, and then eventually you sort of go over it with a better draw engine, better removal, sort of like, things like Be Prepared that can remove the entire board and you can take over from there. Or do you go under it where you try to basically have a lower curve where you race the Genie and it doesn't have the significant impact. So, I don't know. The card seems really, really good. Ruby Amethyst also just... quite powerful.
Some people have been like, if I have a Genie and then you have a Genie, it goes back to when it used to be minis versus minis in set 2, and then you start playing crabs to take it out, right? You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, I mean that was huge. It was actually kind of funny how being on the draw, you would face this dynamic where, do you think your opponent, you play mini, your opponent plays mini, you're on the play, and do you exert that mini? Because if they get you with the crab, like, it's really, really bad for you. But the opportunity cost of also not exerting your mini is extremely high, because the longer you wait to exert your mini and start getting value out of the quest, you know, the quicker you are towards it just getting 2-for-1s by something like a Madame Medusa. So it's like you just basically have to exert it and kind of hope they don't get you, I think.
And now we're in this weird scenario where back when the mini and crab thing didn't exist, again, even though we keep talking about Brawl didn't also exist within that meta. So we basically have another mini that was printed in this set. It's a purple mini mouse. It's just a Tinkerbell, exact same card, exact same stats. 1/3 evasive, 3-cost inkable, quest for 2. But I think the time for mini cards has probably passed, because it's just not that impactful on the board, and it just can be removed a lot easier now, in my opinion. Maybe not removed a lot easier, but like people will just be able to play around it. If people are naturally playing genies in their deck, then again they can just pair it up with crabs and stuff like that to take it out.
I wonder what the like the current high level competitive player sentiment around crab is, because I actually don't see it in a lot of these lists, and I don't know. It's an interesting card that's seems to have been very good in the Ruby Amethyst Mirror in the past, and it seems like it would be a decent answer to something like mirror matches where players are playing Genie. It just has like the extra upside of just being fantastic against Castle.
Yeah, I'm taking a quick look through the decks within the NA versus EU event, and there's definitely one Ruby Amethyst that's not playing it, and then there's an Emerald Amethyst and another Ruby Amethyst. One's playing 4 and the other one's only playing 1. But yeah, it is really interesting to see how much they kind of value this card. Also notable that this Genie is just also like a nice tool against opposing Diablos. I know it comes down a little bit late, but
for sure,
you know what I mean? It's still relevant for sure.
Yeah, it's okay. So, you know, if you're answering it on the draw on turn 4, is that going to be good enough against something like a shifted Diablo?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Maybe you still need brawls. Maybe it's too slow. But the fact that once you get past turn 4, this is another threat that can clear up a later game Diablo, where you don't need to draw the Medusa, don't need to potentially wipe the board, or don't need to find your brawl, or maybe you cut down on brawl, something like that. Like, that's great. That's a great additional utility of this card that, even if it couldn't kill a Diablo, would still probably be a really good card, because it's an evasive threat that quests for 2 that comes down and replaces itself. If you told me in a previous set that we're going to design a card that's a 4-cost uninkable that draws a card and quests for 2 and is a 4 willpower, I'd be like, what? Oh my god.
I think it's the 4 willpower that makes this card, like, honestly, like, particularly good. If it was a 2/3, like, I think the card would be fine. It would still be good, but the 4 willpower makes this card very good, in my opinion, because it's just so difficult to remove. So. Yeah,
there's a few breakpoints in Lorcana. One of it, which is when it comes to willpower, and Lorcana's all about big butts, but one of them is 3, because 3 gets around a lot of 2 damage removal. But the next big jump is 4, which gets around, you know, some removal, but also a lot of combat damage. Like, a lot of combat damage is centered around 3 and not 4, and it's very, very good against that.
It's very relevant, yeah.
Strong card.
The next comment is from MC Thanatos. They say, I think Amber Sapphire will be very good, because Ward from Sapphire and early quest power of Amber can be very good. So I have a little note on this comment, because I found it quite funny. So Teo Time, who is one of the European players playing in the EU versus NA event, he was the winner of DLC Bochum. He won that with Ruby Amethyst, and he has decided to play something quite spicy indeed. I'll link you the list, Brendan, as we're talking, because it is unfortunately bugged in the spreadsheet I sent to you, but I can send it to you now quickly in the chat. It's very funny because he opted to play some Sapphire Amber himself, test out this deck. So this deck is built very similarly to the version that I saw when I was in Paris casting the Lorca quest. Has cards such as the Scrooge McDuck. It has 1/4s like Anna, which are tricky to remove and quest for quite a lot. And this set brought in some interesting cards, such as the new Alice, which has Ward. But essentially, this is just a very, very fast aggro deck. And that is ultimately all I really have to say about this deck. Is it's just another aggro deck added to the existing pool of aggro decks. And this one, I think,
the Kita synergy with this deck as well.
The key
kind of like.
Yeah, the key to synergy is basically I either I have a 1-drop and I'll shift the Kita, or I just play the 5-drop Kita, because then all of your characters that would challenge into mine to remove them no longer can. You need to use, cards from hand to actually remove my threats. But the big thing about this deck in particular is you'll note that a lot of the cards are 1/4s, or you can even see a 0/4 and a 1-cost 4 willpower location, which is essentially another 0/4. And it's kind of what you talked about already. It's like these breakpoints, even 1/4s and even 0/4s can't just be challenged by like one character. It usually needs 2 characters to be answered easily. So
yeah, or 2 turns, which is even worse. I mean, we've seen this dynamic with Daisy Duck in the last set. And obviously we've seen characters with 4 willpower that have performed well because of that in the past. But, I mean, Daisy Duck coming down on 1 as a 1/4 was just drastically different than if it had been something like a 1/3. Like, it totally changes the dynamic of the clock in which you can remove that card. And it's, I mean, really, when it comes to a lot of that removal, like 4 damage removal, like what do you have at a reasonable rate that comes down fast enough?
Yeah. It's like Zeus, or there's a new card that was printed this set, which I don't think is even comparable. It's a 4-cost inkable card that says deal 4 damage to one of your like opposing characters, but your opponent chooses which character it is, right? So they just can choose the worst one. Maybe it's fine, but again, it's not even a song, right? It's just an action. It's another action that you can't get some super good values. It's a steal card. Yeah.
I wonder if like the macro of this metagame will start shifting to be more aggressive and tempo based. Aggressive is hard. It's hard to say the word like aggressive, because I don't think it's going to be like an Amethyst Amber aggro style of deck. I think we see some of these decks tend towards like a lower curve now and have a more tempo oriented game plan.
I think faster is the word you're looking for rather than aggressive, maybe, right?
Faster for sure. I think that would definitely describe it, but they're very much centered around tempo, because we've talked about the dynamic of removal in Lorcana versus character power and character threat. And character threat has seemingly kind of outpaced it. It was somewhat balanced by, these other decks having ridiculous card draw. So if they did make it to the mid to late game, they could just out attrition you, and they could get up the high inks very fast. But from what I've seen from this set, it's like we've gotten a lot more powerful tempo oriented fast characters, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these decks trend sort of away from this top end removal and just try to have a more tempo-oriented game plan by also matching the opponent with sort of aggressive threats. And we saw that. I mean, look at the Ruby Amethyst deck. It is really shifted away from its more controlling and card advantage gameplay to it has the Flynn Sisu package, but then it also just has like other aggressive threats, and it has like a very strong primary like linear game plan to aggro out the opponent.
For sure. Yeah. Next comment comes from Pasky Raps. They say, I think Red Purple will have 2 builds now, a control/attrition version, and then they say a hyper aggro version with Genie. So I have a note here saying, I don't know if I would describe Ruby Amethyst to be hyper aggro, because hyper aggro Ruby Amethyst is still quite a different deck. I would say it's more of a burn deck. So we saw a Ruby Amethyst burn deck appear in Seattle. It's actually the deck that Moyne lost to, unfortunately, the top 64. And that version of the deck is very much focused on, just kind of going under a lot of decks, utilizing cards like a Pirate's Life, and even the, I think it's like Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. Again, like you said, Brendan, these cards that just gain lore from hand, which you really can't do much to stop, right? So...
Well, they also play Amethyst Chromicon, so they're like drawing a bunch of cards, and then they just play this instant speed lore out of hand, where it's even if you have card advantage, even if you are removing the board, like they can just still win from hand. And they're also playing things like locations and maybe even items that game lore. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's funny though when you say like regular Ruby Amethyst versus hyper aggro Ruby Amethyst with Genie, because I think they're both going to play Genie. I don't know if they're both playing 4-ofs, but I think that card I personally think every Amethyst deck has no reason not to run Genie, in my opinion, right now. So yeah, it kind of just seems like an OP card. I don't think there's great answers to it right now, and the answers that do exist, sure, your deck might already have Brawls to insulate against other threats like Diablo that exist in the metagame, but I don't think that trading Brawl for Genie is what you want to be doing on a game-by-game basis. Like, yes, it might save you, and it might be the only answer that exists, or the only reasonable answer that exists, but it's not great.
Yeah, it's more so you might have to, but you never really want to, right?
I'd rather be the person playing the genie every time. Brawl my genie. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last comment is from Hector. They say, there's a good rotation format that fixes all the problems. Unfortunately, Lorcana is not set up to do it. Essentially, each set gets designated a block, and during any given rotation cycle, a block is chosen to be legal. I don't know. Wait, I might have read this wrong. It says, unfortunately, Lorcana is not set up to do this. I don't see a reason why it's not set up to do this, because this comment, to me, from what I'm reading, sounds very much like what Hearthstone has done, where it has the blocks in terms of, like 6 sets are like the standard format, and then, previous sets along with these new sets are like the wild format. Yeah.
I actually don't like that system. And it's sure I think it could be designed in a way that would make me like it more. But what I don't like about Hearthstone is that whether I played Hearthstone 3 years ago, or I played it today, or I played it 6 years ago, like a lot of times very similar archetypes will sort of emerge. And it kind of feels like you're just playing like a shadow of your former deck, or a version of your former deck that is either better or worse. And I don't think that feels very fun. Where I'm like, okay, I'm coming back to Hearthstone. What new cards can I play? It's like, oh, it's basically like a burp of the Hand Paladin that I played, 3 years ago. Like, it's like the same deck, but it just has a few other shit cards in it. And I don't really like that. I like it to be a bit more fresh. I'm not saying you couldn't have any reprints, but it feels like in Hearthstone a lot of times, like the actual core archetype and backbone of your deck is literally just the same cards, and I didn't like that very much.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it.
I saw your reaction. So what was your sort of take on that Hearthstone rotation?
I don't entirely disagree with you, but I think naturally I think it's fair to say, yeah, probably when we were playing the game, which for me it was like 3-4 years ago, was when I last properly played. That may have been the case in terms of like, and I'm gonna give aggro as the example. There's always just aggro decks, but like, oh, it's just like another control warrior. Oh, it's just like another type of this. But I think now the game's very much gotten to a stage where, the power creeps really come in. There are some like absolutely wild, wacky, crazy shit that you never could have even possibly dreamed of beforehand. But I think that's also just because so much time has passed and power creep has really become a real thing, right? So
yeah, I mean, and like Hearthstone's an interesting game right now because, like, who does it market to? Like, who is the game actually designed for? And I think it's just a bit of a different audience that they were designing for a while ago. Like, Hearthstone is very much, and this is probably how all card games should be, it's very much designed to be as fun as possible.
Yes,
and that, like, borders on, like, the game experience being wildly different from what it was a few years ago and wildly different from what we maybe fell in love with a few years ago. So it's good and bad, but I don't know. I didn't like, for a while, I really didn't like Hearthstone's rotation system where they had this core set of cards that would never change. I just found it to be sometimes a bit boring. I wanted to see more of a shake-up. I prefer more like, even if they have to do some reprints, I did like fully rotating out most cards, and then you would reprint the ones you wanted to, and then etc.
Yeah. Last one we have is actually taken from our Discord. It's from Marky Mark. They say, Naveen's ukulele has been great for the Under the Sea version. This is of Amber Emerald, but I don't feel it's enough to keep me playing this deck for this set. So, funny, the Discord just randomly started to talk about this deck, but yeah, it is the deck that I selected for the NA versus EU event. The main reason was I didn't feel like I got enough extensive testing for any other particular deck, and ultimately I just wanted to play something that I felt was I was comfortable with. I feel like it's still quite a strong deck. I think my worst matchup is still Emerald Steel. I think that's really, really difficult to beat. But in terms of new cards, yeah, there were a few new cards that like you could at least consider playing in that deck. But ultimately, there's nothing that stood out to me that would make me think, oh, this makes this deck so much better. So I've changed like one card in my deck. And the one card I've changed is probably okay. It's a 2-cost Emerald Song, which it prevents my one of my opponent's cards from questing next turn, and then I draw a card. So it's basically just like I subbed it out for one of the Painting the Roses Reds, because Painting the Roses Reds obviously has the synergy with Muses, but this new card can, delay a Hiram from questing, which prevents my opponent from drawing a few cards, which could be good if I really want to discard their particular cards they have in their hand. can stop other big targets from questing, like maybe a Tamato or something like that. So I literally only put one in the deck because, like I said, I didn't get much extensive testing. But I think the deck, while I think the deck is still like fine, I don't think it got any better. If anything, it probably just got worse because now because now Genie's in the meta. So now you really have to consider like, oh, do like your muses, and like the Genie will help take out the Diablo, but then you're really gonna have to rely on the muses and these other cards to bounce the Genie or do it under the sea.
Being an okay answer.
Yeah.
I could honestly see muses being an okay answer because I don't know. I could see Amber Emerald out tempoing the opponent. They can draw as many cards as they want. They can replay their 4-cost uninkable as much as they want. But if it's bouncing back the hand over and over again, I think they could be in a very tough spot. Especially when you combo... Well, I guess you don't have access... I guess you still have to kind of win the game pretty quick so that they can't, like, be prepared you or anything like that.
Well, no, because you can play Ursula to get rid of the be prepared. You can play Bare Necessities to get rid of the be prepared. Now, if they rip it off the top, there's literally nothing you can do. But I think if you bounce your Aerial enough and you get enough card draw off your Diablos, then you'll have enough in your hand to refuel after that be prepared comes down, which is basically what happened in the previous, the set 5 meta as well. So, like I said, my ultimate conclusion is I don't think that the Amber Emerald deck got any better by any means, but I think it's still a fine deck to play. But ultimately, I don't think you're going to see it any more than you saw it in tournaments within set 5. I think you'll just see it less, to be honest.
Amber Steel is right now?
Amber Steel is an interesting one. It got some interesting inclusions. I guess I'll just quickly say that that's the end of the building section. We are going to move into our main topic, which is the NA versus EU event, and we're going to be talking about some of the deck lists. So I'm going to pull up some of them. So Zach Bivens, very well known for playing Amber Steel. Frank brought Amber Steel. DeCandio brought Amber Steel. And they all brought a few different versions, but there are some new cards that were included in pretty much everyone's version of the deck. And the one that stands out the most to me in everyone's deck is this new Steel Pluto. This is a 4-cost 1/5 bodyguard that quests for 1, but while the character has no damage on it, it gets +4 strength. So you're basically playing a 4-cost 5/5 with bodyguard, which, to note, you don't have to play it as a bodyguard. Like, you can just play this as a 4-cost 5/5 non-exerted. Another card on top of Lawrence, on top of Smee, that synergizes with Rapunzel. Just a pretty well-statted card. So that's one card that I can see, yeah, definitely may have a place within Amber Steel. Some other cards that people are testing out is you've got the 2-cost Lilo that can, be a bit of recursion from the graveyard. You have the 2-cost Ninkable Calhoun, which is the 3/2 with resist. Calhoun's interesting. It's like just another uninkable in your deck, which is fine, but I'm personally not too sure if it's like definitely needed in Amber Steel in particular, because you already have Smee and like, I don't know, maybe Smee is enough. Maybe you do want another decent 2-cost card, but again, the problem with Amber Steel is that's a deck that can often brick if you just happen to get a bad hand, because there are quite a few uninkables in it, so you're just going to be adding more uninkables into the deck unless you're cutting other uninkables. And besides that, I think that's more or less it. I know Frank's actually testing out the new legendary Simba to see if that has any legs. But besides that, yeah, I think Amber Steel is very much in the same place. And I was joking with Frank when I was talking to him in preparation for this. I was like, yeah, it seems like Amber Steel's on this steady trend of, every set it gets one decent new tool to play with, which I don't think is that bad. Like, I remember back in set 4, it was, the 1/4 2-cost Amber Ursula with Singer 4. Within set 5, it was like, Pete. And now this, it could just be Pluto. But again, the deck's core is still incredibly strong. And as long as each card that comes into the deck is also very, very strong, and most importantly, worth a slot within the deck, because you're going to be cutting other good cards to put this in. As long as the card is, in your mind, better, then I think the deck is decent. So in terms of its position within the metagame, I think Pluto probably helps out a little bit. But time will tell. I personally haven't done enough testing or seen a lot of Amber Steel, but over the next week, we'll see DeCandio, Bivens, Frank play out these matches, and then we'll get a good grasp of, I think, how we feel the deck is positioned so far.
What are your thoughts on Emerald Steel, the boogeyman of the previous format? I guess we could say. And when you set 5, I feel like Emerald Steel was a real breakout.
Yeah, so Emerald Steel is the deck again that Zan chose for this event. And the only changes I do believe that were made is we saw one of the Plutos included. So that's a bit of an interesting inclusion within the Emerald Steel deck. But again, maybe this like 4-cost 5/5 by itself is just like a good enough card to run. There is only one in the deck. There are only 2 Muses, which I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit surprised about because, like we discussed, I think truly Muses is a pretty decent answer to opposing Genies.
See the 4 Coves, too? That's a big difference.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure he only ran 1 Cove.
No, I think he used to run 2 Coves. 2 Coves is usually standard when you're running Diablo. But yeah, I think we've seen a few people shift to this 4 Cove package as well because a lot of people are realizing, like, if you get this Cove opener with the Diablo, it's there a lot of people are I mean it is just really strong. If you're Ruby Amethyst,
Emerald
how do you
Steel things.
yeah, if you're Ruby Amethyst, how do you deal with it? If you're Amber Steel, you can't really deal with it that well. There was even I think this might have been during Spessie's game, but Spessie was playing Purple Steel and his opponent Dale was playing Green Steel. The Spessie ultimately did win, but I think Dale, because this is open decklist, this event, I think Dale went for the Did he go for this? I actually didn't watch the match, but I thought I heard Spessie say that he did like Cove on turn 1 first instead of the 1-drop Diablo because he was anticipating maybe the Baboom killing off the 1-drop Diablo on turn 1, then preventing the shift. That might not be the case, but there's some like mind gaming things that can be done because I think that is the most efficient thing that can be done at the moment is to prevent the shift. You could Baboom the 1-drop Diablo so then it can't be, you know, play Cove, shift Cove, move Diablo. And the downside of booming the I keep saying Baboom, sorry, it's Fire the Cannons. The downside of playing Fire the Cannons on this 1/2 Diablo is if you don't have another Fire the Cannons to back it up, then, you know, this 3-cost Diablo will come down and then it's going to start causing you some problems. But the 3-cost Diablo is still a 2/2. It's not a 3/3. So a 2/2 should be easier to handle than a 3/3. It seems like once the Cove comes down, once the 3/3 is there, if there aren't enough bodies present on the board to take out the Cove, then it becomes like a real impossible challenge. The longer the Diablo remains, the harder it is to win the game. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think like upping that Cove count makes sense if people really want to abuse this opener?
Oh, to be honest, I don't really know the intricacies of the Emerald Steel deck because that's a very high level question. Like I don't know, Emerald Steel is one of those decks that looks very simple to evaluate at first, but then when you get to watching a lot of high level mirrors, you start to realize that there's definitely kind of levels to it. You know, the optimal line to take in terms of like how to scam your opponent in a given match can sometimes be pretty obvious. But then when they get into this like little back and forth mini game in the first few turns of the game where one person doesn't automatically win the game, it gets very intricate. It's hard for me to give a reasonable opinion because I've watched so many matches now of Zan, of V Wonderland, and of, you know, other high level Emerald Steel players where they're playing and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like they definitely have a much better grasp. And I think when it comes to, you know, are we plus or 2 on the Cove, I just don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting. Speaking a bit about the mirror matches, I think this is something I've said on the podcast before, but I personally hate the board states where it's like your opponent has an exerted Diablo and you have a Prince John and you start discarding their cards, but then every card that you discard, because you draw with your John, they're just going to draw straight back with the Diablo. I despise those board states because without removal, if your sole plan is just focused on discarding, I feel like you feel so helpless because with that Diablo on the board, if you're discarding, sure, you also get to draw the card, but it just feels absolutely horrible. So that's when, you know, Pete's can come in and can prevent some of that discarding stuff. It's definitely interesting.
My like casting career for the past 6 months has been a journey of like trying to find more joy in Emerald Steel mirrors. Which there is, honestly, there's a lot there. If you like that type of gameplay, even if you don't like it, I think you can find, if you watch it enough and if you pay enough attention, there's a lot of value to be gained there, and there's a lot of, you know, very technical, intricate play. I'm just burnt out of those mirrors because I commentated so many of them, and I commentated a lot of hour-long plus matches that were just, they were grind fest, to be honest. But Zan's final in Vegas was probably one of the better card game matches I've seen.
I have a question to pose to you because it's a question that's very much being asked within the community at the moment. I don't know if you've really seen it much on Twitter and stuff like that, but a lot of people have been very, very frustrated with Diablo lately. Even before Set 6 came out, they were like, you know, Diablo is such a problem that it forces me to not even want to try certain types of decks and do certain types of strategies because it's this constant thing in my mind that I constantly have to answer. And I spoke to Moyne about it a little bit.
Correct.
I spoke to Moyne about it, and Moyne also agreed that, you know, it's not a particularly fun card to have in the game in terms of it just always has to be on your mind and stuff like that.
It depends. I mean, it depends, right? Fun is such a relative term, and I think that goalpost moves if they get rid of Diablo. Like, that used to be prepared. People used to bitch about be prepared all the time. They're like, oh, I can't deploy my entire hand onto the board because what if I get be prepared? And it's like, yeah, that's a dynamic you always have to think about once you get to turn 7.
Same with Whole New World as well, right?
Yeah. Like, is Diablo the same? Okay, maybe it's a bit less fun and the decision making is a bit tighter than it would be against something like Be Prepared, and a bit less agency is there. But I think that goalpost moves. What I really don't like in Lorcana more than anything, and I do think that Diablo, I'll agree with you. It's a must answer threat that comes down very early and it warps the entire metagame. But the things that I actually really don't like in Lorcana are low cost, cheap threats with ward that have static effects that don't need to exert. I think that that game design is ass. Hence why Bucky is gone. But even like Prince John, to an extent, the Muses, like, I hate that. That for me is like, I'm like, why does this exist? Even when it's not super powerful, like we saw Prince John leave the format for a bit, came back. Bucky is kind of gone now. But that's what I really don't like. Diablo is a bit more interactive. Like, yes, it has evasive, but we've gotten more stuff to reasonably be able to deal with it. And Brawl, while it's a bad answer, has been okay enough because it's been able to hit like other relevant things in the metagame, like the Flins, and it usually has a target. That's what I really don't like. Diablo doesn't evoke as much anger from me because I think it's a more, while it's a more powerful card, the design is more reasonable than low-cost ward characters that don't need to exert to have a static effect on the board, because I think that's like legitimately painful to play. You cannot do anything sometimes.
I feel like, and this is the sentiment I feel from a lot of players, is the difference of when it's just the Diablo opener versus when it's the Diablo Cove opener is very different, in my opinion. Like, the Diablo opener, it's like, okay, like, it definitely seems like manageable, like, because there's cards like Fire the Cannons, there's cards like Brawl, there's stuff like that. It's like, when it is the Cove opener, it does really seem like that is the strongest, that's probably the strongest thing anyone could do in this game at the start of a game.
So you're talking about Shift Diablo plus Cove?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, like, what's the hypergeometric math on getting that? It's not fantastic.
Well, upping your Cove count probably helps it, but I would
say
it
helps. But
let's do standard, because like I said, standard has always been 2 Coves. So I will put out the question, because myself and Brennan, we're not going to sit here and do math for the next like 15 minutes. But if someone wants to quickly do it and let us know next week, probabilities and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a multivariable calculation, but you need the action, you need the 1 cost Diablo, you need the Diablo, and then you need the Cove.
Yeah,
that's a lot. Yeah, it's probably very scammy if you're able to do it, but a 4-card combo, and we could even argue that the 3-card combo itself is good, right? So you're going to be mulliganing for the 3-card combo, and that's almost scammy enough in and of its own, but it's like, if you get the Cove as well, you have this like Exodia opener. I feel like a 4-card combo for an Exodia opener is kind of okay, I guess, and it's also like contextual because the Coves will get you around a lot of the removal as well, so like that the context could change if we get answers that can go to the Cove. But I mean, 4-card combo that maybe auto wins the game, not great, but not as painful as like Bucky. Bucky, the basically 1-card combo that came down and just absolutely destroyed the game experience.
Yeah. So. I think while I think, as we've talked about, like, Diablo isn't, do quotations here, fun. Bucky was definitely way more of a problem, and I personally really disagree with people. Like, if anyone says that getting rid of Bucky was the wrong choice and says that banning Diablo should have been the choice, I think they're very much
Diablo is
mistaken.
way more interactable than Bucky. Like,
Yeah,
Diablo
yeah.
is more powerful than Bucky. Yes, I think the delta power on Diablo is better than Bucky. There just wasn't anything you could really do about Bucky, and it was just, that is not fun. There was very little agency against Bucky, even in deck building. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do? Like, it's war, doesn't need to exert. It's just, and it wasn't even a lot of a deck building restriction. A lot of the characters, the Floodborne characters you were curving into, were already just good characters you'd play anyway. So, yeah, Diablo much more powerful on average, but I don't think that it's nearly as toxic as Bucky.
So I want to briefly
explain me Moyne's deck. I want to hear your thoughts on Moyne's deck. Give it to me.
Okay, let me pull it up here.
Moyne playing Amethyst Steel.
Yeah, so Moyen's deck, I know
It looks like a Spessy deck. Holy shit, I have like PTSD from Seattle. We brought that piece of garbage.
Yeah, so
Just kidding.
This was
that Spessy.
this was I don't know where how he decided to land on this deck specifically, but I know I was testing with him for a little bit when he was kind of running this shell per se. I think his main goal was to see if this version of Amethyst Steel could be fast enough to just straight up beat Green Steel. I think that was the biggest thing he was concerned about, was that if this just instantly loses to Green Steel, there's not a hope I can even run this. And I mean, if you look at the deck, you're like, oh, okay, maybe it might struggle against Green Steel, but it also has 4 Fire the Cannons and 2 Befuddles. That, I mean, even the Befuddle, actually, Brendan, that's another card that can answer Genie, funnily enough, right? That's quite interesting to think about.
Answer.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
which I think is fine. I think that's probably one of the better answers to Genie. Now that I think about it, like we were talking about, like, oh, Muses, it gets value out of it again. Befuddle, same thing, gets value out of it again. But I mean, if you're going under Genie, then that doesn't matter.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this Gantu, Brandon? I know it's probably a bit small for you to see, but it's a 5-cost inkable, 4/3, a quest for 4.
It's like the most Moyne card I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Moyne loves to play like just outlier vanilla creatures if possible.
Well, it's interesting.
Reminds me of
Cerebus. A Cerebus, yeah. It's interesting when we talk about breakpoints, because I do think that when you play this Gantu, it's still not the easiest to remove in terms of you need to have 3 damage, but as soon as it gets exerted, it should be easily taken out by, like
for sure
a 3/3 or something. But
you
guaranteed
also got
that
4 lore.
if you play this and you get the 4 lore, it doesn't seem too bad, right? You know what I mean? So
yeah. So we talked about those breakpoints, right? 2 to 3 is where you dodge a lot of the removal. So I mean, I guess Moyne seduced that most of the time he's questing with this character, and then in matches where you reasonably can't, or at a point in the game where it reasonably can't get to that point, he's probably just inking it. So
yeah, 16 1-drops in this deck. However, 12 of them essentially replace themselves with the Diablo. I think one of the really neat combos I originally didn't see with this 1-cost Diablo was actually like Diablo plus Crab. It's kind of cool, right? Because a lot of the time with this Diablo is like, it's a 0/1, you'll just quest with it. Your opponent, I've noticed at least so far, my opponent rarely just challenges into it because they want to be doing better things, or they want to be questing themselves. And if they challenge into it, they're just giving you a card anyways. So suddenly if you quest with this Diablo for a few turns and then you play a Crab, buff it up, take something out, it really doesn't seem that bad. I'm personally not sure on the exact number you want to run. I guess in this deck, 4 probably just makes sense. But what are your thoughts on the 0/1 Diablo in general, Brendan?
I mean, it seems like a tough dynamic to deal with, right? Like, you don't want to remove it because you draw them a card. Like, if you're in any sort of, like, mid-rangey trading with them or card attrition trade, like, it's not great to remove the Diablo. But one lore turn is... That's actually... I mean, that's not nothing. Like, that's a significant amount to be questing for. And then... I mean, the crab thing with 2 crabs in the deck seems like... I'm not sure if that's... its main use case, but it seems like a great upside to have, that it can now trade and replace itself. So it seems decent. It's hard for me to be like, because you need like a larger sample size and like a larger metagame size to be like, okay, this is actually what I want to be doing with my 1-drop every turn. But yeah, it seems good to me.
For sure, yeah. We could briefly talk about the Sapphire Steel list that I'll be facing. Actually, you know what? Let's just for the podcast, since my game will be on Thursday, probably either when this podcast comes out or the day before. Brendan, I would like you to break down this list. If you don't have it in front of you, I can send you the link. It is Lamb Chop's list. Lamb Chop, very good player. I actually wasn't aware of him before, but I do believe he got top 8 at one of the NA DLCs. So, quite a scary player to face. However, I'm a little confused by some of the cards within this particular list. I can see the potential for the synergies. So, we see the 1-cost Simbas here, the Steel Simbas. 1-cost 1/2s. That when you play, you draw a card, you discard a card. The reason why that 1-drop is in the deck is probably just because you want to maybe play Pleakley on 3, because then that 1-drop's going to go into your Inkwell. For me personally, I don't know why this isn't just maybe like a Captain Hook instead. Captain Hook plus Smee just seems like maybe a little bit better. There is the 1 Shift Simba included, which the Shift Simba in this case is actually maybe even better against Green Steel, because it's when you play this character you may banish chosen item or location, so maybe an efficient enough way to get rid of the Cove. But then if you're doing like Mr. Smee and Pleakley on 2 and 3, then you can just, you know, take out the Cove pretty easily that way as well. So this deck seems to be like maybe just experimenting, doing a lot of different things, but yeah,
it's 61 cards. I refuse to give an opinion.
Yeah, no, bro, I literally said this. I was like, it's I need to check everybody else's list. 60 cards, 60 cards, 60 cards. This must have been scripted, that they made one of the Podcana boys have to play against 61 cards. Oh wait, the other blue steel is 61 cards as well. Oh my god.
There's a Ruby Sapphire that's 61, but
oh my god, what is going on?
Both Ruby Sapphires are 61.
Scripted that one of us has to hit the 61 card deck list. But hey,
61
you know what?
is so bizarre to me.
Maybe
as a number.
But now
I respect 74 way more than 61.
This is the thing, Brendan. Now I feel like I can't lose. It's 61 cards. What do you mean? So
yeah, if you do lose, that means 61 cards is correct. The whole time.
Yeah, we'll never live it down. But
let's hit these prizes.
Oh yeah, let's go into NA Championship, EU Championship, LCQ stuff. So it's finally been announced, which I have to say, they really need to work on that. I know you might have been out of the loop, Brendan, but like
I came from flesh and blood.
Man,
you ever seen that meme where it's like James Franco and he's got like the new song? He's like first.
Oh yeah, first time. Yeah,
dude, Flesh and Blood was like, oh my god.
Are you talking like Flesh and Blood? Are you talking like a week, 2 weeks before the event? Like that seems awful.
Yeah. For like venue stuff, sometimes it was bad.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean, we were getting kind of. I mean, right now it's 2 weeks away for EU Championships, and I feel like we only got this info like early this week, maybe last week. So that's 2 or 3 weeks. Like that is not good practice. So I understand, organizing a lot of the stuff and finalizing certain things is tricky, but they really need to get their act together, in my opinion. But yeah, we're gonna go through the prizes really, really quickly. So just to note, these are the main event prizes for the EU Championship event taking place in Paris in 2 weeks. This is going to be the same pricing for the NA Championship. This isn't confirmed, but I see no reason why it would be any different. The other thing to note is any players playing the LCQ, this is not the pricing for that. For the LCQ, it's going to be 32 pods of 32 players competing. The winner of each pod will advance then into the main event for the European Championship. So that means there's going to be, I do believe, a total of 96 players. 64 qualified from the previous DLCs within Europe, and then 32 from the LCQs. So participation is going to be an invited to the ball promo cards. This is kind of just like your Dragonfire. Top 32 is going to be Elsa's Ice Palace location card. The top 16 is going to be a really nice alt art Cusco from set 1, which honestly, we haven't seen my boy Cusco in some time, Brandon. That was a card in set 1, but yeah, it's seems to
it's just
definitely...
This is not good enough. No chance. No way this card is playable nowadays.
So that's for top 16. For top 8, we see there's going to be a alt art Baymax card, but top 8 is the place where you want to be, because that is where you will get your ticket to the World Championship. So it's confirmed top 8 of the NA Championship and EU Championship will make it to Worlds. So basically, I guess we can deduce that it's going to be 16 players qualified for Worlds, is what it seems like. What's the amount of players usually, Brendan, for like a Worlds event and other card games, in your opinion, that's been? Like way more?
That's tough. I don't know. Magic would be a better comparison. And I don't know the exact numbers, but Flesh and Blood, you can just buy a ticket, so it's like same as a Pro Tour.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
I think 16
Worlds
in
and
my
Pro Tour are
opinion.
basically indistinguishable in Flesh and Blood outside of prize pool. Like it's not any more exclusive. It's the same exclusivity as a Pro Tour.
I think that a top 16 for Worlds would actually be quite a fun event to watch. Like, I think that's a fair amount for the first year of Lorcana. There's been plenty of events, plenty of, you know, chances for people to qualify, and I think Ravensburger are just gonna learn from everything that's happened this year and just hopefully make it bigger and better leading into 2025. This has not been confirmed, but I do think that my assumption would be after the NA Championship in January and then after Worlds, which is gonna take place in March, there's no there's gonna be no events in between them. It'll pretty much probably just be like the new season of DLC starting in May, since it started in May of last year. That would make a lot of sense to me. But I will actually continue with the prizes here, because it's worth noting that if you get top 4, you do still have a chance to win either another Golden Mickey, as a lot of players will have won a Golden Mickey. Some may have not. They may have qualified by just getting the top 16 slot. So, and then after that, it's like, you know, finalist gets a full set of Azurite Sea, and then the winner gets 4 full sets of the Azurite Sea and a trophy. So that's just like, I don't know, just like a bunch of cards that you've no reason.
They move away from the full set thing.
Yeah, it seems like such a lackluster final prize, right? In my opinion.
Yeah. Like okay.
Well, like I mean, honestly, Brent, like you want to get to top 4, and I feel like after top 4, you don't really care. You only care about like the. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you still want to.
I think,
yeah,
like,
you still want to win
cool,
for
but
prestige, yeah. But besides that, like, I really, really hope Worlds isn't like, oh, top 4 get like the World Championship Mickey, and winner gets like
100 sets of Azurite Sea.
10 full sets. So I would trust that's not the case. I think it would be very cool. In my opinion, I think the winner should get like, because they're never gonna like. I think the winner will probably get like a 1-of-1 card.
Yeah,
right?
I think they should just scrap the full set thing completely. I don't think it's cool at all. I'd be surprised if other people do. And yeah, I don't think there's anything exciting about a full set of the set. Like, yeah, you get the enchanteds, but whatever.
If anything, they should.
Promotional cards are way cooler.
If anything, I think they should. Do you think that they should like? This is interesting, because this is also a bad thing if they do this, in my opinion. I was gonna say, do you think they should reverse this? I do agree that they should actually just get rid of it entirely. But do you think if these like full sets or whatever? No, that wouldn't make sense either, because I was gonna say, if you start giving like full sets to like, I don't know, like top 64, top 32, that's just a fuck ton of cards. You know what I mean?
Who's gonna
like,
put the cards in the binder? That's gonna be a bitch of a job. Right there.
That is true. Yeah.
No, I think they should just scrap it and do promos.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It's just not a cool prize. I don't think anybody really cares about it, and yeah, I mean, I guess it looks cool a little bit if you from the outside, you know, if you're like not a player that's competing for this kind of thing and you're not live to actually get to win that. Like, the display of the cards looks kind of cool, like on social media, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just I really don't like it as a prize. I think like a promo would be way better.
Yes, and some of these, like, I do wonder how many of these. I feel like a lot of these decisions would not really involve Disney too much per se, because I don't know why Disney would be like, oh, like, we want the winner to have like a full set of blah blah blah, but like,
I think this. Yeah, I hesitate to say this, but I think the decision for the full set thing was kind of just made by somebody that was a little bit out of touch with competitive play and competitive pricing. I don't think it was like a nefarious decision, or, you know, they're like, we'll just, you know, I just think it was somebody who didn't understand like what people actually want out of pricing, which is okay. I just hope they learn from it, because I'd be interested if, you know, people think this is a good prize, that gives feedback, give us, you know, shoot us a comment on YouTube. But yeah, I think it's a very middling prize in comparison to what you get in regards to promotional cards here. Yep. And that is how it's been throughout the entire competitive season as well.
One thing I want to mention, just moving away from the main event and just talking about the LCQs really quickly. This wasn't publicly stated anywhere before, but I do want to make this clear for anyone playing an NA. And again, like, just double check this yourself when tickets do go on sale. But for EU, it's been there is 2 slots to play in LCQ. There's an AM slot and a PM slot, so 16 pods for the AM slot, 16 pods for the PM slot. You can buy tickets to both. That's how they get you, if you wanna say that. So, you know, you buy tickets for the AM, and then if you get knocked out in like round 3 or 4, they have like side event stuff, but you just buy a ticket for the other one, and then you can go play that one as well. Because I'm pretty sure from what I've checked with the time allocation, even if you get to like pretty much the final round, you should still have enough time to go and play in the in another LCQ. So that's nice that they offer that option. But as you guys can expect, like it was not cheap. Let's say this is the most expensive DLC for just tickets, because it was like €90 for one LCQ ticket and then another €90 for another one. So that's quite a lot of money. But like I said, that's how they get you, and I won't really complain, because they know players like me will pay it if we want to try.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You know? So
I mean, yeah, like I feel like the current competitive Lorcana system is like pure capitalism, because like they're gonna put the number, it's gonna sell out in less than a minute.
Yep.
When it doesn't sell out less than a minute, maybe they'll change the number. But until then, you guys are gonna pay whatever number they slap on there.
Even if it doesn't sell out, like even if it sells like it will still sell like 80% probably, like realistically, you know, it's fine. You know, like the last bit we saw that with like Bologna and Birmingham for our DLCs. Like I think the NA ones have had like super crazy demand. Some of the EU ones, like I know the one in Italy in particular was a little bit slower, but like honestly, that's probably just a combination of it was like peak summertime. Traveling to Italy, even within Europe, is like a little bit more expensive, you know. So
Europeans actually like do things during the summer. They like go on vacation, go outside and touch grass. Americans just kind of like sit inside and play games. No, seriously though, like if you don't know this, like Europeans actually take like so much time off work. It's crazy. Yeah, well, they probably think it's crazy because we take no time off work.
we have the best like holidays and vacation days and stuff. Yeah. What's the allocation for you guys?
It's crazy.
Is like this? I might be wrong about this, but is the standard for like US like 10 to 12 days of holidays or something?
I don't know, but what we don't talk about what grinds my gears. A lot of US companies do something called unlimited PTO right now. Unlimited, which means no fucking PTO. Because there's like a actual equation that they run where it's very profitable for them to do this, because if you have unlimited PTO, they don't have to pay you PTO that you don't take at the end of the year. Traditionally, that's how paid time off works, is that if you don't take it, they pay you. So they institute unlimited PTO, and then they don't have to pay you. But you're like, oh, then I can just take unlimited. I can take more days than I need. So what happens is that people inherently will take less. And yes, you can take more days, but if you take too many, they'll just fire you. And it's like the most toxic, I'll reserve my language, BS system that exists. It's an absolute scam, an absolute 100% scam. And it's instituted by, I would say, most small to medium-sized companies and some larger corporate companies. And it's terrible, because the dynamic is that anytime there's a holiday or anytime you would take off, you're just going to feel guilty. Like it's a toxic dynamic. And if you don't take days off, you won't get paid for it. And then if you take too many days off, you'll just get fired. So like it's, I don't know. I hope that something changes in regards to that, because it's honestly terrible. Honestly terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people have unlimited PTO, basically have no vacation, like no time off outside of like Christmas and Thanksgiving, where it's like normal to take off.
That does make me feel maybe a little bit bad about complaining that I don't have enough days, because I definitely have a lot of days, you know.
Yeah.
So.
It's like a terrible system, terrible system, and they make a lot of money by instituting it, a lot.
The last deck I want to talk about before we just close it out here is actually one deck that was included within the event, and that is Amethyst Emerald. So Artabax decided to play this deck, as that's the deck that he's most known for. But there's one card that we've been talking about a little bit that I do think it's just a pretty strong card. I think it will help the deck quite a bit. It's the Go-Go Tamago. You know this card, Brennan? It's the 2-cost 2/2 evasive. And then when you play this, you can pay 2 to gain lore equal to the damage of a chosen opposing character. So, I think myself and Moyen talked about this card. I really like this card in terms of like, if you have to just play a 2-cost card, a 2/2 evasive is like fine, but this card gets way better during the late game. The fact that it's inkable makes it like super versatile as well. And I think it's just like a good card that I think can slot pretty well into. I do think in particular, it's maybe it slots into Emerald Amethyst a little bit better than it would into Emerald Steel. Even though with Emerald Steel you can deal damage to characters from hand, and then you can play go-go and maybe take advantage of that. But just with more, like I still ultimately feel that, you know, Emerald Amethyst is more of a board-based deck, that type of stuff. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's an important thing you're hitting on right now, because you would think, okay, Amethyst Steel, I like can even Zeus something and it like survives, and then I play. You're not going to want to be playing removal and not removing the character in order to now combo with your 2-cost 2/2, where now you pay 4 and get lore. Like that's just not an efficient way to like play that deck at all. So that's why it doesn't go into Emerald Steel.
Yep, I agree. Yeah. There's also just one other card I wanted to mention. This one I think has maybe just been a little bit slept on within the community, or maybe people don't really see a lot of value in it. It's actually Gazelle. This is a 2-cost inkable 1/2 quest for 1. It says when you play this character, chosen character gains evasive until the start of your next turn. So we've seen cards like this already that, you know, I think that was the Tinkerbell that gives your card evasive this turn. But I don't know if we've seen a card that gives a card evasive until the start of your next turn. I think there's been a few song cards or whatever. But this is like, again, just like another interesting card, because maybe you can like do some stuff with muses that you bounce this, keep making your stuff evasive, keep questing, they can't interact with it. So it's just like this like 1/2 that maybe has a weird little bit of potential in some types of decks. Because making something evasive until the start of your next turn is not a bad effect by any means.
Artabax is experimenting with it as a one-of, but yeah, I'd be surprised if it's good enough on the whole. I think it's a powerful effect, but yeah, paying 2 costs for a 1/2, that seems like a lot still.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, with that, that's the end of the episode. Brendan, do you have any other things you want to mention before we close out?
How many evasive characters are in these freaking decks now? Like, this is something that I feel like Moyne and I were screaming from the rooftops from like the early
from
couple
set
sets.
1, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like this evasive is just like a broken. No, it's not broken. It's just a very, very, very powerful mechanic. And evasion is now just in most decks. Most decks. It's crazy.
And if it's not in most decks have to be able to deal with the evasive cards. Like, they just have to, right? You know what I mean? So
yeah, I think that the metagame is quite warped around evasive characters right now.
Yeah, I mean, even we didn't really talk about it, but even within the Sapphire Ruby deck, the one innovation that's been included is sorry, it's not Din's deck. It's the Maui Shark, right? So that's a 6-cost inkable 7/5 evasive. When this character challenges another character, you may return an action card from your discard to your hand, and whenever you play an action, you gain a lore. Just another big evasive card. Do you know what card I realized this after I submitted my list? Just for I'm going to talk about Amber Emerald, but this card in general, even for Amber Steel, I personally think that we really could see World's Greatest Criminal Mind sneaking back into the Amber Steel decks, because I think there are a few cards like this Maui Shark. We've seen like Big Sisu, we've seen Tamatoa. There are a few cards with, I'm even thinking now, this Pluto, this 5/5 Pluto, that, I mean, World's Greatest Criminal Mind actually kind of hits that as well. But I understand it's a bit of a weird card because there's also equally a lot of cards with low strength within Lorcana, right? But I think,
well, it seems like we're in a low strength metagame for sure.
Sure.
Being like one of the most powerful, or one of the most common removal cards.
But I think it's maybe easy for people to sometimes forget about World's Greatest Criminal Mind, even to run as like, because Amber Steel used to run that as like a 2-of back in the day. So
yeah,
I think it's a song card.
More in like the Tamatoa metagame. Like it was like an anti-Tamatoa card a lot of the time. Right?
Sure, yeah. But like I said, I'm just I want to just leave it on people's mind, because if we do start to see these bigger, I think particular Maui Shark, I mean, if you're playing Amber Steel, sure, you could play a Zeus to remove it, but like, you know, World's Greatest Criminal Mind also removes it. But just a card to consider. I think if you want to talk about Amber Steel in general, with one of its weaker matchups being red-blue, It's got the big Sisu. It's got the Tamatoa. Maybe the new Mary Shark. Something to consider for sure. But yeah, with that, that's the end of the episode. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version of this available over on youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there, like, comment, all that jazz. Twitters are @BrendanAPG and @Kawatek_CG. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next one.